Hey guys, it's Doc, and you'll have to excuse me because I'm really not ready for this, but I figured I'd bring you along on this. I always like to sort of bring you along on some maiden voyages, but this is the maiden voyage of our Razorback testing. We finally got the mats in today, and I was at the shop. We've been working all day. We've been working from 6 a.m. It's after 6 right now. Got home. And I ran out to the garage. I actually brought home one of those test sluice, and I ran in the garage, and you can hear the echo. But I'm going to just do some quick flow testing with it, and I'm going to start with some bare mat. I'm going to introduce some real fine gold to it, and I've got some cons that I'm going to throw to it as well. But just so you know, let me explain real quick where the Razorback comes from. If you know anything about our mats are a high energy exchange mats, the UR and the scrubber mat. And typically you run them alone and the water stays very soft along those mats. Even though there's a bunch of aggressive looking features to them, it's still a very smooth running mat. So what happens is you have to have high water flow, high water speed, velocity, not flow, but speed across those mats to actually make them active. There's all kinds of intricate structures on those mats, whether it be something that looks like a riffle or a groove, and every single one of those things has a purpose on it. So as the water speeds across it, it becomes energized. And you'll start to see little vortexes all different places. And so it gets exposed to a whole bunch of different surfaces. The heaviest material drags along the mat. Gold will drop into those groove areas and be exchanged out and settle down into those deep capture zones. That's how those mats work. The problem with that is that there are some people that can't get that high water velocity. So as an example, if you have a stream sluice, it's real hard to get the speed up enough to make those mats energized. The grooves just fill up, there's not an exchange going on. And I encourage you to watch. There's another video that we just shot last week about fine-tuning the mats. And you need to watch that video. It's about 25 minutes long, and it shows us running nothing but mat, extremely high water speed, and I don't want to say zero losses, so let's say above 99% capture rate. We have actually some testing, some insurance tests, miner's moss and expanded metal at the end, testing it. But that's a real good video to watch. But this new mat, the Razorback, the whole purpose is instead of creating energy through water speed and an exchange, to go back to sort of more traditional riffle style, because a riffle really doesn't need a lot of water speed to create energy. In other words, the water hits a ramp, it hits that ramp, it jumps over that ramp, and a vortex is created because of the obstruction. And so you have a low pressure zone behind that riffle. And so we wanted to create sort of a mat that sort of blended the two, so that someone could put it in a stream sluice, run it very soft, and still have a good exchange happening, but at the same time incorporate a few of our drop zones and capture zones that didn't require too much velocity. So I'm going to be running today, I'm probably just going to be running about 2,000 GPH, which is probably, if you look at it, it's close to a stream sluice. And then later in the week, we're actually going to be in the field, and we're going to push this mat to its high end. We're actually going to put it into our big 4-inch dredges, screaming water across it, and see what happens. So we're looking for those flow points. We don't know. We know the mat works. We know the capture zones. We've done a whole bunch of studies. This took almost 2 months to get this right in development. But this mat, we do not know the thresholds of the velocities and water flow and so on. But one thing you'll notice about this, if you look at the diagram of this, when you look at the diagram, and I'll probably put that up, it looks like it's big, but it's not. You take that diagram and you miniaturize it, and you'll see it in this, that it's very, very small. These, the actual, we'll call them riffles, but these little riffles on here are probably only, just over 1/4 inch tall. So what happens is it doesn't throw the gold into a very high water flow, because the water flow at the bottom of your sluice is a little bit slower than it is at the top. So you want to avoid throwing fine gold way up high with big riffles up into that flow again. So That's really what this is. It's sort of a micro sluice. It's a micro pattern that fits on the bottom of the sluice. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when we put this in some real screaming water. So I'm just going to get it up and running. I'm going to just shoot some matte. This isn't, like I said, I'm not prepared for this. I've got some concentrates sitting around, but I don't even have the right screens here. I'm not prepared for this, so bear with me. This is just going to be just sort of rolling raw test footage, but I thought I'd shoot something for you. I did want to give you sort of a look at the map, and I'm going to put my hand near it so you can get sort of a feel for the size of it. But like I said, these little ramps are only about 1/4 of an inch tall. Now there is a pre-ramp, there is a pre-lift before this ramp, and we discovered this pre-ramp, and I want to talk about that for 1 second. Okay, so I did want to talk about this pre-ramp real quick because that's something I want to explain. It's something that we discovered on accident. If you take a look at the riffle on this, you'll see a riffle that looks like a traditional riffle, and then right before it there's a ramp right before it, but there's a space right before that riffle. And what we found out, we were actually, this was 9 months ago, we created, what we wanted to do is we wanted to actually create an adjustable level on a riffle. And so we put a piece of adjustable metal in front of that riffle. And as we lifted it, it stayed in place and created a gap right in front of that riffle. And what we saw was, we saw a little micro vortex right before this ramp. And we saw fine heavies and fine gold dropping in there. So that's where this pre-ramp comes in. And what it does is, when you have your riffle here, normally water hits it and it flips over it. And this pre-ramp sort of gently sort of lifts up that heavies that are dragging on there. And if gold starts to hit in here, you'll get some fine gold down in these ramps. It's an amazing action to watch when you watch it, but that's a pretty cool feature on it. But I did want to point that out real quick. I hope you can see that pre-ramp right there, and there's gold sitting right in that pre-ramp right there. That is a cool sight to see right there. Right inside that pre-ramp there's a bunch of fine gold, -50s, -100s. And it's moving, and if it does come out, it's just going to flip right over in here. One thing you can see on this is you can see how the material doesn't get thrown way up in the mix-up here, even though this is low water flow, and that the material gently lifts before it hits this. I want you to try and to see. Sorry, I'm moving the camera around, but I want you to try and see all that gold sitting right there. And that's that nugget trap that we call it. It's a drop, it's a nugget drop. There's a bunch of fine gold sitting right in there. So you've got, here's your main riffle, comes down. There's that drop before the pre-ramp. The pre-ramp comes up. There's gold in the pre-ramp. And there's gold right behind the riffle too. That's a beautiful sight there. And look at that pre-riffle. That pre-riffle in there is just full of gold. Try and zoom, I'm trying to focus on it. Again, I'm running pretty high water speed here for this mat for a stream sluice test or a moderate high banker test. Sorry guys, but when I show you this gold, I want you to understand that I've only been dumping this gold just in about 3-inch wide section, just sort of dumping it because otherwise it's just going to sit in the mat because this thing is grabbing gold too well right now for filming. As soon as it's hitting the mat, it's getting stuck, so I'm having to go and try and look at the cameras and try and figure out where I can dump it. But this is a real good run. I'm really pleased with it. I'm going to show you the gold. See, this is your pre-ramp, this is your riffle, or pre-riffle, this is your riffle, and then go afterwards. And I'm seeing a bunch of fine gold. So I'm going to have to go to autofocus. Excuse me. I'm going to have to go to manual focus. So excuse me. But I want you to see some of this fine gold in here. Right in here and in through here. There is your pre-riffle ramp. Fine gold inside of it. Look at that fine gold back in here. That's amazing stuff. That's 100s in there. These are good cons, by the way. I mean, there's little teeny gold up in here. But you can see this is right behind the riffle, and you can see the gold tucked in there. And that's minus. There's minus 20s. There's minus 50s in there. And there's some big gold coming up too. And then look at that. That's cool. That's that drop. We call it, I guess, the nugget drop. But look at all that gold right there. Sitting right in that nugget drop. Right before the ramp. Look at all that right there. That's amazing. Look at all that gold in there. And all the way up into here. But that's really cool. That's a bunch of fine gold sitting in there. Tons of little teeny specks in here. So anyways, this is, I wanted to take you along on this maiden test. It's exciting. This is the first. We've actually had this modeling in flow testing and it worked really well. But this is the first time, of course, we actually have the real mat in our hands. Again, we're focused this on more of a smoother high banker, a smaller high banker. We'll probably be starting to put this in our minis because it works so well now. And it's just phenomenal. So if you have a mini, if you have a stream sluice or even a high banker that runs a little bit softer, or you can slow it down, you got fine gold in your area, that's a real good mat. Especially if you have something where you can classify it down, you can classify down to 1/8 of an inch. That's amazing. Now, we're also going to run this in our 4-inch dredges, which water rips through this thing. So who knows what that's going to look like. We'll see. But we'll show you that testing later on. But I wanted to show you the Razorback initial testing, initial run, 2000 GPH, running at about probably about 1.5 inches pitch. But I can tell already that it's going to take some high water flow. It's a good wide spectrum on the velocity, which is nice. Hey guys, so we're done here and I've pulled the mat out, and the next thing you're going to see is I'm going to take some time, and I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to talk during this, I don't think, but I'm going to take it inside, and I've got a 50 to 150 power microscope hooked up to my computer. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to videotape these channels, and I'm going to videotape under the microscope some of the different ramps and the gold inside of there. Again, this is just a first test. It's cons I've never seen before, so we ran it through just for the heck of it, so it's a surprise for all of us. So now I'm going to take you in, I'm going to show you some stuff from under the microscope.